Now we've seen a little bit about how to target text, HTML, and values using jQuery, but you can also use jQuery to add content, append or prepend, and remove content. And so that's what we're going to be taking a quick look at. So as far as getting and setting content, if you use .text, that actually sets the content that is between the HTML elements. So it's kind of like JavaScript's text content. HTML lets you not only set the content, but also the HTML elements. So it's like inner HTML. Val lets you target forms, form input areas. So it's like JavaScript's value. Okay, so we basically have the same capabilities in jQuery, but it's a little shortened way of doing the same thing as JavaScript. So if we wanted to add some text or change text that is associated with an ID of test1, okay, we don't want to put any HTML in. All we want to do is change the text. It's just the ID selector .text, and then in parentheses and double quotes, whatever the new text is. And I have connected these to buttons. And if we click button 1, so here's my listener and my handler, which is an anonymous function. If we click on button 1, the test1 ID is going to be updated with Scooby-Doo, where are you? And an alert will be displayed. If we click on button 2, the test2 ID is going to be updated, and you'll notice that this one is using .html, and that is because we've got HTML mixed in with the text. And if we use button 3, we are using the test3 ID to update val, which is a form element. Okay, so we're targeting test3. We're going to update the value that's displayed in the form. And then if you look down here in our HTML, you can see we have an ID of test1 and test2, and those are both just paragraphs. Then we have an input field, and that is where the ID of test3 is, which makes sense because we're using the val method, which indicates a form. And then we've got our 3 little buttons. So this is a live example. So if I hit set text, what it is going to do is it's going to activate this button 1 listener and event handler, and we should see Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you, in place of this is a paragraph. Okay, and then if I click on set HTML, what we should see, because that's going to activate the listener and handler for the ID button 2, what we should see is in boldface, Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? So let's try that. Okay, and then finally, in the last one, if I set the value, it's going to change what's in the input field, okay, because this is button 3 ID. And this next section, so what we just covered was getting and setting content, okay, using either text, HTML, or value. So in addition to getting and setting content, you can get and set attributes. So for this, it's selector.attr for attribute, and then in double quotes, it is the attribute that you want to set. And this little example has an event listener and handler for clicking a button. We have a little variable called text that is storing the value of the link is. We're concatenating that with basically the href attribute associated with the CIT ID. So wherever the CIT ID is, let's find it. It's right here. Okay, the href attribute is right here. So it should say the value of the link is, and then it should display that text. Okay, and then you can see that we are updating a section of text that has an ID of display text, which is right here. So we are updating that location. Okay, and so it is already showing that link. So that is just simply retrieving it. You also have an option of updating a value. So it's basically the same thing with .attr and then in parentheses and double quotes the attribute that you want, but then you do a comma and in double quotes you indicate the value you want to set it to. So here we've got display.text, and we're displaying the current href attribute. And then if they click a button, we have a ID of new URL. We're going to retrieve the value from that and store it in a string. And then you can see that we are updating the href attribute with whatever is in that string. And then we're displaying the attribute again. So just looking at this, here is ID equals CIT. So this is my current href that should display. Then you can see here's new URL. When I click the button, it's going to replace that with the new URL. So let us run this live. So we got fabulous CIT course. Here's the URL for the link. So right now it's showing us the URL for the fabulous CIT course. And let's change this. And we should be able to change this to whatever we want. And it should pick up whatever we have in this box. Okay, because it's retrieving the value from here. To add new content, you can use append, prepend, after, and before. So what is the difference? Append puts it at the very bottom. Prepend puts it at the very top. And this would be of the selected element. So let's say you have a list, an unordered list. It would either put it at the bottom or top of the list. After and before are a little different because they aren't targeting the current element. It's either going to put it before the current element or it's going to put it after the current element. Okay, so that is a little bit different. And you will be using append or prepend, depending, in the list app that you are going to be creating because you need to add and remove from a list. So for append, it's just whatever selector you are targeting, .append, and then whatever it is that you want to add. Prepend is very similar. The difference is you're using the prepend method, and obviously it's going to come at the top instead of the bottom. So here I have a little example. Got two buttons. One is going to prepend text and one will append text. And I tried to do them in different colors, but you can see here's button 1. That is prepend, so it'll come before. And button 2 is append, so it's going to come at the bottom. So let us look So right now, all we have is the word set. So if I do prepend text, we've got countdown ready set, so that came before. And then if I do append text, it's 3, 2, 1 blast off. So it's looking at that element, it's putting things above or before or after, above or below. So the after method doesn't look at the current element. It only looks at the current element as far as positioning, and then it puts it above the current element or below the current element. Okay, so we're not really dealing with putting it at the top or bottom of the current element, like this one did. See, the current element in here is paragraph. So it was either sticking the text, above set or below set within that paragraph. Whereas after and before, it's going to actually go before the paragraph or after the paragraph, not inside it. Okay, so that is the difference. And for this example, I actually have a graphic of cardinals. And so we're either going to put text above the cardinals or text below the cardinals. Okay, and you can see that in here, I've got some HTML, and I'm going to create the element, and I'm putting that text before the image. Okay, and then I'm going to hide my button because I don't need it anymore. And for the second button, again, I've got HTML. I got a couple lines of HTML, in fact. And then I have a text line where I create H3 element. And then I'm using inner HTML to add a little span. And I'm adding all of this after the image. So image is kind of the reference point, and I'm putting in basically H1 and H2 after it. And then I'm hiding the button. So let's take a look at this one. So the image is the reference point. So if I do insert before, okay, I am going to get that title, that H1, above the image. Insert after, I'm getting the H2 and H3 and this last one, which I can't remember, after the image. Okay, so it did the first one, H2, H3, and then H1, H2, and then it created an H3. So 3 different ways of doing it. Do you have to do these things 3 different ways? Absolutely not. Okay, so if you wanted to just kind of set it up this way, that's fine. I just wanted to show you how you might do it using a DOM command. You can also use jQuery to remove elements. This may come in handy for gameplay, which is why we're covering it. So obviously remove removes the selected element and any of its children. So that means if you have an unordered list with a bunch of lines and you choose to remove the unordered list, all of the lines will be removed as well. Detach removes the selected item, which includes any text and child nodes, but it keeps data, events, and a copy of the removed element so it can be reinserted at a later time. Okay, so that's kind of important if you're playing a game. So you don't have to like recreate the element, you would just have to attach it. Empty removes child elements from the selected element, and unwrap removes parent elements, leaving the selected elements. So here would be how you would use remove. And so if I had like a div1 ID, I could remove that. I could remove paragraphs that have the italic class. Okay, so a couple different examples. For empty, this one again removes child elements. So if I have a div and I did .empty, it would remove any child element inside the div, which would probably leave a do nothing div. But for gameplay, these are all methods that you may decide to use. So here's a little example using remove, where I'm actually going to remove the image. And then I've got a separate button where I am inserting an image. Okay, and I'm using HTML because you can see I've got the entire HTML image tag right in there. Okay, so here's the example live. So let's remove it. Boom, it's gone. Let's add it. So if you wanted to see examples of how to use Detach and Unwrap, I do have links for that. So this is Detach. So it's going to get rid of all paragraphs. So we've got a couple paragraphs and we've got a button. So if we remove the paragraphs, those are gone. That only leaves the button. Now, again, the difference between this and remove is that if you wanted to bring back those paragraphs, you can attach them. And here we've got Unwrap. So let's take a look here. We've got a div and article that are being styled in pink and yellow. And then we've got a paragraph inside a div and a paragraph inside an article. And here we've got p.unwrap. So if we remove the parent, right? So p.unwrap means get rid of my parents. Then the parent formatting is going to disappear because these no longer exist. So you can also get and set CSS classes. You can use add class or remove class. You can also use toggle class that'll let you go back and forth. And you can use CSS, which we have already used. In fact, I think we've used several of these already, and you will be using some of them in the assignment as well. And if you want to see specific examples, you can actually click on the command. So here, for the first paragraph, we're going to add a class of intro. So I think a lot of these are actually, what I like about jQuery is it's pretty self-explanatory. You can actually read it and pretty much tell what it's doing. So we've got a couple different paragraphs. We're going to be adding that intro class to the first one. And the intro class is going to increase the font size and color it red. And then if we take another look, let me see, I'm going to get rid of some of these. Got way too much open here. And let's see, remove class. So this is kind of the reverse of what we just did. So right now we have the class of intro on both of our paragraphs. So if we tell it to remove the class, this isn't just going to remove it from the first, it's going to remove it from everything. And you may be thinking, well, what if I just want to remove it from the first? Then we put in :first after P. Let's run it and click the button. So this is super flexible, not hard to customize. Here's another example of a remove class. And let's see. So I've got an ID called orange class. And I'm adding a class. And so it's going to add that styling associated with the class. I changed the text. And let's see, you look at P colon or hashtag content, so it's an ID of content within a paragraph, and I change that as well. Then I've got an ID called remove class, where I'm removing the orange class, changing my heading text, and also changing the paragraph with the ID of content. And then you'll see with the fancy fonts and remove fancy fonts, it's basically the same thing. I'm adding a class called fancy fonts. I'm changing some text, and then I'm removing that class. Okay, so we'll add orange. We'll remove it. Back to being boring. Let's go to fancy fonts, and then we remove them. And again, toggle class, all it does is it goes back and forth between applying it and removing it. Okay, so add remove orange, add remove fancy fonts. And we have looked at the CSS method that allows you to change the CSS. And what this does is it shows you how to just retrieve it. Okay, so it's just whatever your selector is .css, and then whatever the property is, it will retrieve that. So if you're not sure of what the value is, this would be a way of getting at it. And again, these are just different examples. So if we did paragraph.css, it would change the background color of all of our paragraphs. This would change the text color of all of our H2 elements. And again, if you're going to do more than one, you have to put commas in between them. And you'll notice that there is a colon here. So let's look at this one. Change the font. All right, so let's take a look at the code here. So here we were doing background color of dark orange, color of white, font size, and then we were targeting display and just basically putting in a paragraph with nothing in it. Doing something similar for fonts. And then when we used info, this is where it's actually just retrieving what was set. Okay, so we're retrieving what was set for color, font, family, and size. We're going to update display. And then you'll notice that this is where all of that HTML is that displayed all of this fun stuff at the bottom. So jQuery can also target dimensions, and it can target them directly. So you can do a selector.width or your selector.height, and that would be the width and height of whatever you are targeting. You've got inner width and inner height, so that is dealing with the padding added in. Outer width and outer height is dealing with the border added in. And then you have outer width, outer height with true, and that includes the margins. So let's take a look. And so here we've got the width of, it's retrieving the width and the height. And so let's click on that. So it's showing you the width and the height. So if we do outer width, I gotta see, okay, it's camel cased. Outer width, and we do outer height. And this does have some padding, so we should notice this change. So let's run this. and display. Okay, so it did change because of our padding. And then let's do inner. And inner is going to be width and height. It's going to be padding, outer head borders. Okay, so this is just width and height and padding. Let's try this again. Okay, that totally makes sense. Padding is 10, so 10 on each side added to 300 is 320. Let's do outer. Okay, so this is padding and borders. Now our border is 1 pixel. So what I would expect to see, if it's going to take the width, it's going to add in the padding, that's 320. And then with the border, that should be 322. Yep, that's exactly what the width is. And then we have the last one, which is outer width true, and that adds in margins. So let's put true in here. And the margin is 3 pixels, so that would be 3 on the left, 3 on the right, which is 6. So I would expect to see 328 on this. And that's exactly what it is. Okay, and there are other examples for you to play with, but I do encourage you guys to go out there and play with it just like I did, because it will help you learn the difference between width, height, inner width and height, outer width and height, and then using the true setting.